Thank you so much, Tiger, and welcome everyone, whether you're watching live or getting this on the backside. But you guys that are live, you will get to ask all of your questions. All I have to do first is pontificate. So, as Tiger said, congratulations, and we're incredibly excited to see you all race. I think it's going to be a wonderful event. This is a part of a Purple Patch series of educational webinars that we have been doing over the course of this year on all aspects of performance, as well as, of course, race course overviews. I've been excited about this one because today is special. It's all about the World Championships. So what more can we do this? Well, let's first frame why we are doing these sessions. And I think first, it's just completely central to the mission of Purple Patch. The mission of Purple Patch is to empower and educate all human beings to reach their athletic potential. And so we believe that empowered athletes can create higher performance, but also help the sport in itself. And I think that that's why we're all here tonight, as well as learning, of course, about the 70.3 World Championship. So we hope this is helpful. I'm going to go through and try and give you as much information and education as I can, at least my perspective on the World Championships. After the event, we are going to send you the recording so you can put your notebooks away. You're going to get to rewatch this as much as you want as you go in. We're also going to, of course, add the PDF, which is really deep in detail about everything you need to know with the event, and a whole bunch of other follow-ups that are educational and I think beneficial for you all. So we're going to send you a link to share with your friends if you've got other people that you think might benefit from tonight's session, etc. I will say that if you have deeper questions following tonight's session that we don't get to today, send them our way. You can just email us at info@purplepatchfitness.com. We will do our best to get back to you as quickly as we can with an individual response as well. And of course, if you really want to have a conversation with us, we're happy to set up a coaching consultation with you as well so that we can help define your best strategy, whether it's fueling strategy, going up to the race, calming the nerves, whatever it might be. So we'll make sure that we add that information into the notes following. So here's how it works tonight. I talk, you listen. Sounds very good, doesn't it? But as we go along, I want you to post questions because we are going to have an opportunity at the end of my thoughts for just going free form. And so don't save up. I'll try not to pause unless there's something really, really important. Then, of course, Tiger will keep me on track and help me course correct. But as we go along, Tiger is going to be reviewing the questions and she will moderate them so that we can really get through some time. And if we need to go over, I don't mind at all. We'll go over time so that we can make sure that we get to as many questions as we can. Now, before we dive into St. George, I want to ask a question which I have asked a couple of times on pre-race overviews, which is what happens next? And after this event, you might have other events looming. Maybe even some of you guys are prepping now for the February Kona. Or it might be this for the year. You might be done after this. Whenever your last event is, I think it's important for us, before we get too focused on an individual day, that you are, I hope, on a performance journey. And that performance journey, and I'm very passionate about this. Some of you guys will listen to the Purple Patch podcast and say, yeah, you just talked about this last couple of weeks. But the performance journey should not include 2 to 3 months of complete random recovery, a complete break from the sport. It is important that you take a break, but I really encourage you to be smart with that break. Turn your back on the sport for 10, 14 days, maybe a couple of weeks, but then every athlete should enter a phase of what I call preparation. And it's a phase of training that's much, much lower training load, much lower commitment in terms of hours and emotional and physiological stress. But equal to that is critical, and I would say the most critical phase of the performance journey globally. It doesn't matter what level of athlete you are. Athletes that nail their quote postseason, as we call it, or off-season, pre-season, people have different little nomenclature for it. But that phase after a complete restoration, just turning your back, which should be quite short, that phase is preparatory in nature and it absolutely sets up your platform for you to avoid injury, for you to optimize hard work that is coming ahead. And so I can't go into talking about a world championships without, in my coaching lens, looking beyond and saying binary thinking is a curse of many athletes. I'm all in, I'm fully committed, or I'm completely out and random, got to spend more time with the family, I'm just going to turn my back on the sport. And it messes athletes up. And so much of the frustration and underperformance and injury cycles can be cured by just doing a little bit of specificity, still leaving room for more freedom and rock climbing and skiing, whatever else you want to do over the winter break, but making sure that you've got a backbone of preparation. And so I cannot help but do that. We're going to add some more information about what we label postseason, just to help you on your journey. And I want you to put that in the back of your mind. Now, Dixon, shut up, get on with the 70.3 World Championships. Well, ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelt, because we are going to go through as much as we can. The first thing I want to do is frame this race. I am going to go through swim, bike, run, some of the specifics of St. George, establishing the right mindset. But let's first, in this virtual room, knowing that we've got athletes in the USA, from South Africa, from Thailand, all on this call right now live, all coming to the 70.3 World Championships. Let's frame this race. It is a championship. It is a world championship. What a big title. But here's a secret that I don't want you to tell anyone else. It's a race, and it's a triathlon race, and that comprises of swimming, cycling, and running. In that order, in case you forget, by the way, that's worth remembering. You swim, then you bike, then you run. And I want you to remember that you arrive to this race next week on merit. You have done something to qualify for this race. You have trained well, and I really encourage you to strip it down to its most basic level. Despite this title that it carries, ultimately it's just a race. And I invite you to focus on what you can control with a very, very simple and actionable commitment, whether you're trying to win the darn race, whether you're trying to podium in your age group, whether you're trying to just get across the finish line with a very challenging course that this is. I encourage you to take on a simple commitment. And it's one of us that all of us can do. And that's whatever happens on your race day. And I can promise you that there will be some unexpected things that don't go your way. But whatever happens, you, will maximize my effort and commit from start to finish to do my best. I will maximize my effort and commitment from start to finish. That is the thing that will ultimately drive your success. And what it also does is it leaves room. It leaves room for setbacks to occur, for adversity, for challenges, for roadblocks. I don't want to say it, flat tires, whatever it might be. But there is absolutely no room in that commitment for you to pull the parachute, for you to give up, for you to let your bottom lip wobble and go, oh, it's not my day, because you are committed to giving it your best from start to finish, no matter what happens. And if you have that, you're in a great starting place. And so I think that what you're going to hear tonight is every set of strategies that I have, or any piece of planning that you have, and everything that you do from tonight through till the race, all of your strategy, all of your planning should be anchored in your controllables. And so before you start worrying about things, you can ask yourself a simple question. Can I control this? Can I control what the temperatures are going to be? And if you can't control it, don't spend energy or time focusing or thinking about it, because it's unanswerable. So I focus on who else is racing, what splits should I be able to do, where you might come overall, whether you can go faster than your fastest race elsewhere, or anything else in that type of realm. It's just what ifs. It's just what ifs, and it's irrelevant. It will not help you deliver your best result on the day. And so instead, spend your time and energy over this coming week or so before the race, learning the course and the logistics, because that's empowering. The more you understand and can be familiar with something, the better place you are to go and tackle it. And that's the same as everything in life. You want to set up a plan for tackling the terrain, how you're going to manage the environment, how you're going to dose your best effort over the course. And hopefully I can provide some perspective tonight. And then you're going to have a little bit of empathy for those that can't attend and gratitude for the fact that you can attend, because this is a World Championships that's happening in a crazy environment. And you just go out there with the only what if that's acceptable. What if I just go and do my best with whatever hand is dealt? And if you do that, you know that when you finish and cross that line, that you will be really proud of yourself, and you'll probably enjoy the experience more because it will provide satisfaction. Now, you plan and plan and plan, course, logistics, your plan for tackling the terrain, the environment, how you're going to manage everything around that race day, but you also must maintain what we call a dynamic mindset, because things will change and planning is good, but you've got to execute with a dynamic mindset, and you'll have to be ready to make smart decisions. But if you focused on what you can control before, when things out of your control do happen, you're better equipped to manage it. Very simple. Okay, so what about St. George itself? Some of you guys would have gone and raced there. It's a very popular race in the US. It's a fantastic race. It has been for a long time now. What do you need to know about St. George? Well, I'm sure most of you guys have done your homework, but the altitude, there's a snippet of altitude. It's about 2,700 feet. It climbs a little bit higher over some of the passes on the bike, etc. But generally, altitude is not a massive factor. You start to really experience shifts in performance somewhere around 3,500 feet and above. And so you don't have to overly worry about high altitude. It's not like going to race at Boulder at 6,000 and 7,000 feet. But you are in mountain-like dry air. And so you will get dehydrated more quickly, and it will creep up on you. You won't get the sensations as much. And so in the days leading up to the race, it is good to hydrate. And of course, in the cooler mornings, as I'm going to talk about, you can't forget to hydrate to prepare yourself later for the day. That's a second consideration of St. George. While you can go onto weather.com right now and look at the temperatures, which will be scary because it's 107 degrees there, I believe, tomorrow, it generally, because it's the desert, is a cooler morning going into a hotter afternoon. And I'll give you a specific example. So yesterday's weather, at race start time, it was 65 degrees in the morning. So nice temperature, nice and warm, but a little bit cooler. And then by the time it crept up to 4 p.m., it was 95 degrees. So that's actually race day prediction. That's what it should be. Yesterday, it was 71 in the morning, 81 at 10 a.m., 91 at 1 p.m., 106 at 5 p.m. So don't look at the high temperature of the day and think, I'm going to be running in 105 degrees like it was yesterday, because you're going to be raising through temperatures. And if it was yesterday, thank goodness it's not, it wasn't, but 71, 81 at 10 a.m., 91 by 1 p.m., where many races will be finished. And it's hot still, it's hot, but it's not as hot as the 106, which is the high of the temperature. So does that mean that heat won't be a factor? No, it doesn't. But it does play in, as we'll get into, some of the strategies of how to manage the heat and prepare for the heat earlier in the day. The one thing about this course in St. George is there is very, very little shade. And so you are more than likely to have direct sun on much of the day, outside of earlier in the morning when the mountains are providing some of the shadow in the bike course. But on the run, you are going to be mostly shadeless, sun beating down. So heat will be a factor, particularly if you've got a later wave start. That's the way that the cookie crumbles. or you're on the less fast on the population of athletes that are doing this. And so I'm not dismissing heat as a factor, but I want to put it into context for you. Another component around St. George that's quite important is this is physiologically quite a challenging course, and we'll get into that a little bit, but I think it's an emotionally challenging course, especially the run. This is going to have a course where a lot of folks will start to feel sorry for themselves or go through phases where they won't feel very good, and they look up and all they see is eternity. And it just goes on and goes on at this relatively unforgiving gradient on the run. And so this is an emotionally challenging course. And rather than that eliciting fear, what you want to do is elicit preparedness and action. And so we're going to get into that. So a little bit of altitude, a little bit of environmental heat, might have some wind, but my guess is not too much wind. And overall, yes, a challenging course physically, but also emotionally. And so let's plan for it a little bit. Before we get into it, into the swim, bike, and run, I'm going to go through all three elements of that. I do want to talk about the logistics of this race. I'm sure you all know by now, but it is a two-transition race. So the swim venue is completely separate from T2, where the run occurs and the bike finishes, obviously. And this is really, really important for your planning. You must really understand your arrival to the lake or the reservoir and the logistics around the event, particularly as we're in the environment of the pandemic. So I would really encourage you to do extra homework and give yourself extra time for everything, for registration, for parking, for getting the shuttles on race day morning. I would give yourself a buffer on everything, because there's no need to amplify stress by not knowing what's going on. So it is actually one of those races that it's really, really good to read everything. And you can do a lot of that in our follow-up course overview that will be helpful to you. But of course, there's more information out there as well. And then finally, I think it's my duty to say this, but we have a lot of travelers from geographically dispersed all over the US. We are living in a pandemic right now. And this is happening in a town, or at least in a state, in which the overall societal pulse on how to manage this pandemic, rightly or wrongly, is relatively loose, pretty open. And so I would just recommend, wherever you're coming from, to stick to your principles, your precautions that you're used to, that you feel safe with within this pandemic. And so I think it's important that everybody just come in and stick to that, be respectful of each other, do the best job that we can. The good news is that the vast majority of this is going to be outside, but just a thumbs up from me to stick to what you are used to and comfortable with, and I won't say anything more about it beyond that. All right, so course bullets. Here's where I think that you guys might start to have questions. So just a reminder as we go through, let's stick to the bullets and hit them up as much as possible. And of course, I should preface this, I'm not going to tell you everything right now about the course and break it down minute by minute, meter by meter, because that's really comprehensive in the written course overview. With that, there are some things to consider on this course. Returning athletes from the May St. George, the way to think about this is effectively, it's pretty much the same swim course as that we run regularly. It's pretty much the same bike course and a very different run, although a run that tracks over some of the elements of the May race course as well. And so if you haven't done this course before, you should know that it's not easy. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing because it's a world championship. It's going to create a more honest race. It will mix up the race, and it's one that provides a bigger reward, both for yourself and your own satisfaction on how you perform, but also in the overall standings. The thing I love about this course, outside of nice road surface, really honest and fair, provides a bit of personality and challenge, is that it really rewards the athlete who is smart and brave. And that's what we want when we go to a world championships. We don't want something easy. We want something that rewards the prepared, the smart, and the brave athlete. And so let's go through and give you some highlights. The swim, 3 disciplines, guys: swim, bike, and run. I won't talk too much about transitions, but the swim, it is a more simple course, and that's a good thing. And it's actually a nice course. I will say that the first thing about the swim, I'll say 2 things. Number 1, you're going to get on the shuttle, or you're going to get delivered, or you're going to go and park over at a big open reservoir area. It will be dark when you arrive, potentially still. Maybe it'll be light, actually. I haven't looked that up because it's later in the day, or later in the year. But it will be a little cooler in the morning. So I would arrive with extra clothing, maybe more clothing. The last thing you want to do is be chilly. And I know 65 degrees is not that cold, but you probably do want to have at least a puffy or a sweater. Keep yourself warm before race day. As I said before, arrive really early. I think that's really important. And then you want to do something that many, many athletes don't do, and that's do a warm-up. So sort your bike out. When you rack the bike the day before, because of the temperature swing, I would go and check firstly, I wouldn't put your tire pressure too high when it's going to sit in the heat the day before. And secondly, I would check your tires in the morning. Another reason to get there a little bit earlier in case it has expanded and had a little bit of a pop and a flat. You can get it changed and it won't be too stressful. And then make sure you get the core temperature up before this swim. I really like athletes. It's going to be very, very difficult to get into the water, but at least get the core temperature up and do some arm swings. The big question du jour is this thing wetsuit? Well, our spies have us. The current water temperature today, 78 degrees. That's above the wetsuit cutoff for amateurs. And it ain't cold today. It's not chilly. And it's not going to get cold before race day. So here's what's going to happen on race day. You're going to get told it's wetsuit or non-wetsuit. Who knows? It's close to the cutoff, but the simple action, here's another, look, we cannot control, yeah? We can't decide what's going to happen to the water temperature. We can't inform the decision of where they're going to take the sample for. My guess is always that they try and make it wetsuit as much as they can if it's close. But just be prepared for both. Arrive with both to the swim start, not to your hotel room, to the swim start, because it can change. Wetsuit, non-wetsuit. What are you going to wear? Think about it, set it up, arrive to race day, both. Even if they tell you the day before, it's wetsuit. Arrive with both. Be prepared. It has changed before. You can control what you can control, and that's what you can control. Whatever the decision is, it's the same for everyone. The swim itself is typically flat. It should be like glass, but this is a reservoir that, if there's any wind at all, very quickly it can get choppy. And so it's in your best interest, Thursday or Friday before the race, to go across and look at the line of the buoys. Understand the flow of the course and look at the line of the buoys. And don't just look at where the course is going to line up, but look at the terrain behind those buoys. So if there's a line of every 100 meters, a line of buoys, you want to understand what the mountain peak behind that keeps you pretty much right in line. Because if you know that, if the wind picks up when you're halfway through your swim and the water gets choppy, as it has done in races before, then you have the terrain to look at, which is much easier when your eyes are like this. You can look at a big mountain rather than just seeking buoys when you've got lots of arms around you. So know the course, know the terrain lines, because it's a wonderful sighting cue, and then you have familiarity, you've controlled what you can control, and you go and do your thing. But hopefully it's dead flat, hopefully it's a lovely swim. Nothing more around that. The one thing I'll say around execution, it is a world championships. I say it's only a race. Nerves and excitement are going to be high. Manage your swim start. Manage your swim start. I always love athletes to dial in their timing and connection first and then add speed and power. So really make sure that you're swimming with good connection, and then build the effort. And that word build, you're going to hear a lot as we go through this. For the vast majority of athletes, there are very, very few ex-collegiate type swimmers who can go out hard and it isn't too hard. So go in smart, controlled, and your speed won't be any slower than you fighting it. So calm, calm, calm. That's number one. Number two in execution. Sounds so simple. Swim in a straight line, including you, Andy Williams, in a straight line. How do you do that? You sight frequently. You looked at the course, you understood the course in the days prior, so why don't you follow the course? And the only way that you can do that is sighting frequently. Don't forget it, because it's no good swimming to Kansas and then to Hawaii, then to Kansas and to Hawaii, and zigzagging your way through this course. It doesn't matter how fit you are, how much your swimming's improved. If you swim extra distance, it's not going to help you. And then finally, whatever your performance level is, the swim can become monotonous because it's pretty much 2,000 meters, 1.9K of swimming. And that's a long duration. And people start to get distracted and look at the mountains and the sun's coming up, and they just fall into this rhythm. I much prefer athletes to inject variance. So keep yourself engaged, and you can do that by making mini intervals out of the buoys, or more preferably, I prefer to have you count strokes. 100 strokes at your race effort. 1, 2, 3, thinking about form, connection, acceleration. Then add in 50 strokes, a little bit stronger, and then 25 strokes, reset time and connection. Whatever the rhythm is, 150, 25, whatever works for you, it doesn't matter, but 100 strokes normal, 50 strokes, pick it up a little bit and accelerate, 25 strokes to reset form. If you recycle that, it places the mind into being present and actionable. And if you're present, you're going to yield best speed return. And for many less trained, less equipped athletes, that's a minute or two of just staying present in your swim. And that's how breakthroughs occur. So I'd encourage you to do that. Coming out of the water, don't believe the myth. You do not need to overkick coming in to get the blood flowing to your legs. That is bunk. That's not a smart strategy. All it does is increase your breathing and heart rate without any return. Don't panic coming out of the water. Stay calm and efficient. And most importantly, don't desperately peel back the wetsuit and look at your watch for validation that you're having some form of a heroic day. Because the information on your watch coming out of the swim will give you no relevant information of whether you've had a good, a moderate, or a bad swim relative to this course on this day. You can only learn that after the race. So come out of the water, the swim is behind the ears. It's like yesterday. You can never go back. And so it's done, and you carry on with the process, and you focus on being calm in transition and then getting on with, what's next, Tiger? Oh yeah, the bike. That's right. We'll get onto the bike. All right. You can pump your questions for the swim if you have them for me, but I'm going to move on to the bike here. I'm going to share my favorite mantra for this course. You ready? Ride the terrain, not the power meter. Ride the terrain on this course, not the power meter. That doesn't mean your power meter is not a useful tool. If you ride with power, it is a good tool. But what I mean by that, ride the terrain, not the power meter, is I would not suggest looking at your average power as the driving goal in this race, both during the race or after the race. This course is about smart management of terrain to yield your best speed. That's what it is. Smart management of terrain to yield your best speed. And so you want to make the rolling terrain in this race and the hills an opportunity for speed return. When you're going up in grade, and the only way you can tell that outside of the feeling is looking with your eyes up the road. But when you're going up in grade, you're going to want to build into every single roller or climb, build into the bottom of it and push a little higher in your effort or your output. And you can see that on your heads-up display. It's called a power meter. And so you want to build in and invest a little more effort going up a grade. Every single time you're going over the crest of a roller or a hill, you want to accelerate. So here's a different way to think about it. You're going up. Every time the grade dissipates, your wheels accelerate. On this course, that's every time. Every time the grade dissipates, your wheels accelerate. Very simple rule of thumb. And then finally, on any downhill grades, you want to get the very best speed return possible with as little input as you can put into it. If you're buying a house and you're going to flip it, you want to get the best financial return while investing as little as you can. It's similar to that on the downhill grades here. You want to go fast as you possibly can, but the less input you can put into it, the better it is. And if you put a little more effort into the grade and accelerate over to the hills and then build your speed on the downhill and then enjoy the ride, what will happen is your average power over all of this continually varying degrees will maybe be a little bit lower than if you just went on a quest to push up the hills and keep driving down the hills because you're chasing average wattage. And it might even be lower, but you've gone faster and you've expended less energy. And I think that is a good thing. And you can only be successful in that quest by keeping your eyes up the road and planning and responding and plotting, and then using the output data such as power or your heart rate stress, which is an internal cost, of course, as a part of your decision-making matrix. Okay, now that's enough on this. I'm going to push more, but I'm going to pass on this and we'll go on. Let me say a couple more things about this bike course. There's way too much focus by athletes and coaches on Snow Canyon. You might have heard of Snow Canyon. It's at just over 40 miles in. Don't ride scared. Ride that hill strong and smart, because the grade on Snow Canyon is actually really accessible. Now, I say that coming from the Bay Area, lots of hills around here. If you're from Florida, you might disagree with me, but this is an accessible grade. And it's also not that long in the relative time or duration that you're going to be riding your bike. So don't place too much emphasis on it. You've got 40 miles of bike riding before then with lots of variance, lots of terrain management that you can yield. Just leading into it, maybe the last half a mile, get your resources, get the last calories, ride up it nice and strong, nice and sustained, using all of the tools. And Purple Patch Athletes Live tonight, you know all of your tools, you know the special sauce. This is where you put it into action. And then when you get to the top of that climb, it's a wonderful time to pump some calories in and big hydration, because you've got a nice downhill that is fast, but the nice thing is, and I'll say this in parentheses, it's not that scary. There's enough variance in it that you can actually moderate your speed. It's not like the bike is rolling away from you. So it's a great time that you can start to prepare mentally for the run, but you can be absorbing the resources that are going to help you set up for a good run focus. Okay, now to finish this, we've got to talk about a couple more things on the bike that are so critical, but they're critical to your race overall. The first, coming down that grade, I said fuel and hydrate at the top of it. Try and keep your legs moving as much as you can. So while you're descending, and I said carry speed, it's really good to keep blood circulating. And the answer is why? Well, pretty much that grade goes straight into T2, and then you're going to get off your bike and run straight up a grade. And that's not very pleasant. It's very cruel in design. Again, another bonus for this race. So the more you can keep your blood moving while descending, the better you will be at transitioning your modalities bike to run. So that's a really important component. A second component, with all of the terrain management and planning, and with the nice cool morning, you're not going to get signals of what's coming up in an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours time, which is a run on challenging terrain in rising heat with the sun baking down on your back. So you got to nail the basics. It is critical that you are setting up your run performance in the initial 60 to 90 minutes of this bike ride. Pacing, hydration, fueling. I can't give you specifics on that because it's highly individual, but don't forget. And once you dig a hole, this is a race that the punishment will be severe. Don't forget to fuel and hydrate, follow your plan when you're not getting the signals. The excitement is there, etc. Really, really important. So how should we go about the run? Well, quite simply, you need to be a relentless bugger, as they say in England. You've got to be a relentless bugger. You get a lovely welcome to a 21K run course, and that's that the heat will probably start to bubble up, and your first welcome to this lovely run course is about 5 kilometers of going uphill. So you've got, and I'm going to switch to old money now, you've got about a mile to a mile and a half of a pretty calm grade, really good to start to find form and posture. That's number one, stand tall, and then it tips up a little bit more. It's never that daunting, but it is a climb that is relentless. And if you go and look at the video as well, and I have run up this grade, it just feels like you're running on a treadmill. And I mean it in the worst sense of the word. And so you need to be prepared to manage that. The first thing is you need to build in the effort. You really need to build in the effort. Start calm, find your form, and then you can moderate or manage depending on the environment, your state of fatigue, your resources. And it's always easier to go up a little bit more and press a little bit more than it is to get your heart rate through into your mouth and then try and moderate and manage. Because as soon as the champagne cork pops, the bubbles are overflowing, and we don't want that to happen. So build in, build in. Many of you guys here will be utilizing walk breaks, and you will be rewarded for it, and be smart. They limit your system stress, and they maintain the opportunity for good, consistent form. And so that uphill running, walk run or a run walk strategy is a really good and smart way to approach it. But the reward and the quest is going to come from, yes, managing your resources on the way up, but then being able to run with great form and best speed return, similar to terrain management on the bike, on the flats and most importantly, the downs. There's a simple rule. You don't walk downhill. It's a massive speed penalty. Don't walk downhill. Okay? So let's talk about it. You've got 2 loops. You're going to manage up on the grade. You've got some rolling on the top. You've got a little bit of a downhill. You've got another steep little grade. And you're going to come flying back downhill. As you're running downhill, you don't have to run downhill hard. I think that's important, particularly on the first loop. You don't have to run downhill hard. You run downhill with great form, light on your feet. So when the foot is landing, you're picking it up and allowing this thing called gravity to do its thing. Now, I assume that you believe in gravity, although I'm not quite so sure with the recent approach to science for some people, but assuming you believe in gravity, as you're running downhill, it's easier. And all you need to do is allow the feet to keep up with yourself. So standing really tall, staying light on the feet, not allowing the whole body weight to sink in, that's a huge speed return for you. But that will only come light on the feet, keeping good speed return, etc., if you've done a good job of managing the uphill grades. So even the winner on this course, they might push on the uphill grades, but they're still going to be thinking, I must be able to run downhill fast. And fast isn't hard. It's supple and light. Really, really critical. So what's the mindset on this run? Well, there's long drags. I would encourage you to maybe drive up, maybe ride up the days before, break it down into sections as much as you can. When you come off, if you're like, oof, I feel awful. Okay, what can I control? Comes back to the same thing. I can control my posture, my form, my management of it, and my resources. and get this course broken down. It's 2 loops, but I would really think about in each loop 2 to 3 sections to break it down. So break this run course down into very small projects that you know how you're going to tackle. All right, first climb, that's section number 1. And I'm going to do that as a building effort. I'm going to run walk strategy as I go up there. Boom, done. Project number 1 done. The top piece with a little bit of downhill, a little bit of uphill and rolling, that's my second piece. The third part of the loop, mostly running downhill. This is going to be my focus, nice and light. Rinse and repeat, do it again. Really, really important. So that's the big loop of it. I'm going to come back up and I'm just going to do a really quick hit list because I want to make sure that we've got plenty of time for questions. Remember this, if you don't remember anything. Warm up. Be smart on your swim start. Be prepared, and I didn't mention this on the bike, be prepared that as you come out of the swim and get onto the bike, it's another cruel element of this bike course design. There is no rhythm in your initial miles. So you might feel pretty awful in the first 2 to 3 miles of this bike. It's because of the force flat coming out. Don't let it become emotional for you. No one feels good. Once you know that, it's great. Good. All right. Perfect. Boom, stamp. It doesn't matter how I feel for the first 4 or 5 miles of this bike course. I'm going to build into it. Number 4, build into the bike. Don't just wait and doodle and then wait. Snow Canyon, here's how I'm going to be a hero. It ain't worth the priming or the pumping. And it's at mile 40. Build into the bike, build into grades, look for speed return. Huge. Number 5, the downhills. Fast doesn't mean hard. Remember that on the bike and the run. Fast doesn't mean hard. You can use gravity, build the speed. And finally, remember your commitment. Do you remember what it was? Whatever happens on race day, I will maximize my effort and commitment from start to finish. Whatever happens on race day, I will maximize my effort from start to finish. In other words, squeeze the sponge. Squeeze the sponge of your will, of your physical resources, and it doesn't matter how much obstruction or challenge or roadblocks or adversity. Squeeze your sponge absolutely dry. Leave everything out there. Don't let the occasion bypass you. Lean into the challenge and do one last thing. Smile. Smile. Because it's fantastic. And it's a world championships. And you're getting to race this year at this time. And so smile. And if you squeeze your sponge completely dry, I promise you, no matter what a crazy stuff happens on race day, you will finish and you will be proud of yourself and be satisfied, even if it wasn't what you expected. So go into it, full blaze, no fear of failure. Tiger, I think we can go to questions. I will just say I will be out there on course. Feel free, absolutely come up and say hi. I'd love to see any of you guys. If you bump into me, I will likely have a shirt like this on. Purple Patch athletes listening, we are gathering up Thursday afternoon. I'm afraid we are unable to extend that beyond Purple Patch athletes just because of the pandemic. And so if you're not a Purple Patch athlete, love to meet you. Come up and say hi. Purple Patch athletes, I really hope that we get together up before the race. And before we go to questions, just a quick reminder that if you do bump into me and we're at a bar or a restaurant, I like IPAs, they're nice, and I like pale ales, but my favorites tend to be Pilsners, particularly in this environment. So a good cue for you as you go through. Tiger, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. All right, we are going to get started at the top, at the swim. Our first question from Sue. She wants to know, what's the best way to handle the time between when the first wave goes off and for those that might be in a much later wave?
Yeah, that's you're sort of, it's the peril of almost every world championships that there is. It's great that there are wave starts because you are racing against your peers in your age group, obviously, and it makes for a better competition for the people that are competing like that. But every year there's a whole sector of people that get a more frustrating or challenging experience that you have to navigate around. Not in your control. This is what it is. So a couple of things that are important. Firstly, really go, and I would even almost go before, like in the days before, look around and think, okay, what do I need for shade? And can I find some nice shade? Where am I going to sit? And if you do have family or friends that are going out there, which is logistically challenging in itself, they might even bring a chair for you so you can chill. Bring hydration with you. You don't need to be a camel and nervously pumping, but between doing a little bit of a warm up and setting up your equipment, and then you want to make sure that you're probably, if you have an hour to an hour and a half, you're going to drink half a bottle to a bottle in that time of some form of electrolyte solution. Have your pre-race fuel. It's long enough that from breakfast a couple of hours before to getting to the race venue to then your race start, you're probably going to consume some calories 5, 10, 15 minutes before your wave start. And as much as possible, sit and relax. You can listen to podcasts, you can chat to friends. I would not sit there and grind outcomes. I would, as much as possible, just enjoy the occasion, watch others, but stay off your feet as much as possible. And it's frustrating.
Great. All right. And then once we are in the water, Anthony wants to know any suggestions on how faster swimmers can do a better job of passing the field of slower swimmers from an earlier age group.
Yeah, so I say this, and sometimes they do everything they can to prevent this from happening, but swimming on the inside of the buoy line until the turn buoy is often, they don't let the pros do it. The first age group, it doesn't happen, and then it starts to become a bit more loose as the support is there. So swimming on the inside buoy line is often clearer. Outside of that, as if I ever had that as a swimmer, I was a faster swimmer, and when I raced age group, I would actually swim way to the outside and have control. So I didn't mind swimming a little wider if I had clearer water. And the other thing that I would do, and it's a bit hard to integrate this, but I became very, very good at sighting. So I could swim effectively sighting every stroke and just keeping my awareness up and planning and not lose any time. So hopefully your sighting is good enough that you can sight every second or third stroke and integrate it into your breathing patterns. That would be the best thing. And the final thing is, don't get frustrated because it is just one of those things. But sighting and awareness and looking 3 swimmers up and looking for your line, think about it like a game of Frogger rather than a source of frustration. And it's just what it is.
That's our first Frogger reference in a webinar of the year.
Yeah.
All right. Carolina wants to know, what's your recommendation on reducing nerves if the wetsuit is, or if the swim is non-wetsuit legal? She's done it in a local lake. She knows she can swim the distance, but has maybe some anxiety around a non-wetsuit swim with so many other people in the water.
Well, they are spreading the waves out. It's what will happen with these waves is that firstly, there's a lot of people in the water, but there's not a lot of people that are forced in a mass start. So in like a Hawaii Ironman, where it's just basically boom, it is chaos. And that's a swim where there's a lot of physical contact and you have to really actively move out of the way off course, really, to even get any clear water, unless you're very, very fast. So that is a physical swim. A lot of people in the Hawaii Ironman just swim the whole time and you are literally wrapped. I mean, it's classic old triathlon style. In a race like this, where it is wave start, you have much more opportunity. You will be swimming over people sometimes. If you're a slower swimmer, you might even get swum over, but it's way easier. And I say this without listing fit, it's way easier to get swum over than it is to swim over someone. So it's actually, as soon as someone's over your legs, they're going to move off. But if you are a little bit fearful, I would, as you line up, I would line up to the outside of your wave. That's number one. Line up to the outside, the way outside of the turn buoy. And when the gun goes off, everyone goes, poof, even the slowest swimmers, boom. I would count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, because guess what? It's not going to make a darn bit of difference. 10 seconds, but you'll get 100 people going off, 150 people going off, and then you'll instantly have clearer water. And then it'll just be the drip feed of people swimming by you that maybe get close. But you might just have a swim all to yourself if you do that strategy. And then finally, stay really, really calm in your initial, count your strokes. I'm going to count to 100 strokes 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just give yourself a focus point. And if you keep doing that, then you can fall into, now I've gone through my 500 strokes. Now I'm going to follow Matt's magical rhythm. I'm going to do 75 strokes steady, 25 strokes a little bit stronger, 25 strokes easy. And it's amazing. When you do that, you'll actually start to stay present on the controllable, and all of that other stuff will start to fade away. And you might even, here it is, you might even enjoy it. And if you do, you definitely owe me a Pilsner.
All right. Final swim question here should be a quick one. Jeanette asks, do you recommend a particular shade of goggles for the swim?
I would show up with 2 pairs of goggles. Number one, 100%. I would have some that are darker lensed, and I would have some that are a lighter lens globally. I always like to have those and just make the assessment that, but most people darker lens. I wouldn't worry about having big mirrored, like full-on lenses. I would just have a darker lens, but I would absolutely have 2 pairs.
All right. On to the bike, we have Tracy, who is a Floridian, wondering if you have any suggestions specifically for downhills and descents at higher speeds.
Yeah, first thing I would, if you're getting there early enough and you have the ability to do this, head out and go and ride the descent on Snow Canyon, coming back into the T2. Go and do it. And familiarity breeds confidence, and you'll realize it's not actually that bad. That's number one. Number two, everything related to the bike starts with posture. And so when people are worried or nervous or scared or less skilled, they tighten up. It's a natural component, and they grip the handlebars like they're strangling the neck of a dove. So if you're holding a dove, you want to make sure that you're not killing that dove, and you're keeping your hands really supple, your elbows soft, because what happens there is that allows the bike to do its self-correcting general properties that it has. So it all starts with looking ahead, riding at the pace that you are within yourself, sitting to the side of the road so the faster folks can go flying by you, but most importantly, staying supple, because then any little sticks or twigs or little holes or ridges that you go over, you have shock absorbers. But if you're like this, locked elbows and stiff, you become a pogo stick. Pogo sticks ain't good on a bicycle, okay? So if I can say anything else, calm, look ahead, and stay supple on the bike. If you remember that cue, and then you'll be good. But go and ride that descent in the couple of days before the race, and you'll say, wow, it's actually not that bad, because and that's the fastest descent on the course. So you'll be good to go.
And does that descent have some turns? Is it pretty straight? Amy was wondering.
That's the great thing about it. It is not one of those sort of rocket ship slides at Wet n Wild in Florida. It doesn't just drop you straight off. There is enough variance to it that you can actually manage, and it's at a grade that you can manage. So there's a certain grade where it just gets a little too steep, where the bike continually runs away on itself, and it's just building speed. This, you can get up to a really good speed, but you can also easily moderate your speed. So athletes can ride down this descent under the banner of what they're comfortable at. I will say at the other end, way too many athletes ride at a speed in which their ambition outstrips their skill set. Don't be that, and please don't bring your ego. If I had a wooden spatula, I would sit at the bottom and smack the bottom of every person that's yelling at people, on your left, when they're not very good bike riders anyway. So ride down, stick more to the middle if you are a faster bike rider, but also appreciate that this is our hobby ultimately. So you're not going to lose any time if you have to brake a little bit. Don't panic.
Great. And Marcelo wants to know, with all these hills, is a TT bike still the obvious choice, or could a road bike possibly have some merit?
If you have both bikes, there is only one choice. This is a TT bike all the way. 100%. This is a TT bike, 100%. And yeah, that's it. If you only have a road bike, you're going to have fun and it's going to be fine, and choose the bike. Do not go out and buy a TT bike. But if you have both choices, it's not a road bike course I don't think for anyone. I think it's manageable for sure.
Great. Okay, on to the run then. Chris, Purple Patch Athlete Chris, wants to know, any tips on handling the steep downhills on the run?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I will note before I answer that it's absolutely true that Alex Fuller will get spatulated. I did see that comment, and he will, whatever happens. And that's before the race, so I can't imagine what's going to happen to Alex after the race. But, Chris, to answer your question, there are runs in this that are steep enough that where you have to be careful on this run course is it's 2 loops. And so any damage that you do on the second loop downhill finishes at the finish line. And so it's just going to be more soreness the next day. On the first loop, you've got to manage the trauma to the quads. And you've also got to be aware that when you're running downhill, you're going to get to the bottom and then you're going to just go uphill and change muscle groups and reactivate the posterior chain. That's where people will cramp. And so when you're running downhill, the first is most importantly, and I mentioned this before, but don't run downhill hard. It's not going to give you much speed return, and it's just going to come at huge cost. Number 2, you want to, I like athletes to think about when you're running, and imagine being someone like me at 200 pounds. When I land and my foot hits the ground, my hips and body weight sink into the ground, and I must absorb and then re-accelerate. And that's why I say I look like a donkey dipped in cement. Well, when you're running downhill and you've got gravity in your favor, you can try and prevent that deceleration and re-acceleration by almost feel like you're running on hot coals a little bit. Because we don't care about the posterior chain, the propulsive elements, because gravity is taking care of it. So light here, and then if you want to manage your speed, you can actually roll the arms across, or you can lift, and it's the only time you do this when you're running, you can lift the shoulders up a little bit, and you can lift it up nice and stable, roll the arms across. That's going to help you. If you want to speed up and allow it to flow a little bit, and then stand tall and just lie on a pillow, let the arms drop down, and let the leg speed carry all the way through. But light, hot and coals, nice and fluid. You just got to be careful on that first loop for sure. And then secondly, you've got to be really gentle building into the second loop, because you are going from quad pounding to suddenly the calf and the hamstrings that have done a whole bunch of work on the bike, and then they've done a whole bunch of work on the first loop. You go and ask them to do work again. They say, I thought we were done. And they go, bow, and you hear Stairway to Heaven, and that's not a good thing.
All right. Next one, we've got one from Alex. So, and actually this was asked by several people. Any additional strategies or tips for the hot run? If you do start to feel like you're overheating, your heart rate's getting too high, is there any hope of recovering? I will jump in and say to everybody that the athlete guide did indicate there would be ice at all of the run aid stations, which are about every mile. But I'll let Matt fill in the additional details for that.
Yeah, firstly, and Purple Patch athletes know this, the first thing we say when you're standing up to the race line is don't F it up. And so you stay focused and take the lessons of tonight and say, hey, first of all, try and do everything you can to control the situation in the initial hours of this. Okay, and I know that sounds facetious, but take care of that business, because that's important. even if you do it well, you might start having elevated core temperature, etc. So firstly, dress sensibly, like it's probably a good course for a light running hat or visor. It's good for lighter clothing as much as you can, obviously. And it is about pacing and building your way in first. So not running with ego, but building in and managing. The place where you start to tip where the thermostat goes is if you drive into the bottom of a hill, heart rate and breathing goes up. It takes a long time to get that down because it's a bit like a champagne cork or a pressure cooker. So if you can prevent that in your effort, then you can incrementally build if you're good. If you are feeling like stress is like this, it's a wonderful place on the uphills, particularly in aid stations, to take a walk break. It's not coming out of Whole Foods with you shopping a walk break. It's a purposeful walk break to reset your posture, lower the stress as long as it takes, and take on fluids and ice. Ice in your armpits, on your back, in your head even, and physiologically that's not great, but it feels great, and that's all we care about. Even in the groin, where the thermoregulators on here, getting these cool, and bring it down, getting ice and downing it with some slushy or some water, trying to make it a slush because the body cools from the inside out. And so do that, and don't let your spirits drop. If you're like, okay, crikey, that's happened, get the core temperature down. And then as you feel like, okay, now I'm under that sort of tipping point, now I'm going to build into my run again, and I'm going to try and manage that. And it's going to be constantly, for many athletes, keeping the mind active and positive and constantly doing this. Okay, what do I need to do to bring it down? Now I bring it up. Oh, I've gone again. Okay. Oh, I've gone again. And you might have to do that 100 times. But remember the mission that we talked about? That's what you've got to do. So weather, cooling, taking care of business fearlessly, and then managing it with smart walk breaks without getting doom and gloom. And I'll never forget Jan Frodeno winning his first Hawaii Ironman. He probably took 24 walk breaks over the course of that race. And he certainly walked every aid station. It's world champions can do it. You can do it too and have a marvelous performance.
Great advice. Okay, we have just a couple more here. One from Carolina who was wondering any additional recommendations on hydration leading into the race and using products specifically like Pedialyte.
I'm going to do an advertorial here for a company that I really like because everybody likes it, and it's a better product and it's more suitable. Here's what you don't need to do is walk around the expo round and around and around, baking yourself and drinking more and more and more fluids. We are not camels. And I said squeeze the sponge dry, but once your sponge is saturated, you can't overhydrate anymore. And so what we have is your training load going down, going into a race. And so you want to maintain good hydration that you normally would do when you're training, but you're doing less training. You're then going into an environment. So in the last 2 days, I would have good daily hydration like you do every day, but add a bottle of fluid in the morning, drink a glass of water or two with every meal, and before you go to bed, I would have a solution that's, depending on how much of a salty sweater you are, and we won't go down that rabbit hole, but 1,000 milligrams of sodium with a drink, or 1,500 milligrams of sodium. And then when you wake up race morning, do the same thing. 1 bottle, then you're done. No more than that. I think the best tool for that is Precision Hydration. I think that they do a very neutral tasting drink and nobody has GI distress. So I would encourage you to do that. But whatever suits, if you like Noon, if you like any of the other products, it's great. You just don't dump yourself full of Pedialyte or Gatorade or any of the super sweet stuff because it will turn you rotten.
And super quick follow-up on that, the one that just came in specifically for people that are going to be flying in. Is there any additional recommendations in terms of the flight aspect, hydration wise?
It's the same as you're flying at what is the elevation in a cabin? 9,000 or 12,000? I think it's 9,000 feet of elevation. So you want to stay hydrated, but it's no more than the environment of going to this race site in a dry desert-like environment. You know, wake up the morning of the flight, have 1,000 milligram solution, drink lots of fluids, don't drink alcohol because it dehydrates you. Enjoy your cup of coffee in the morning if you enjoy it. I will probably have 3. And then before you go to bed, have 1,000 milligrams and you'll catch up. No problem at all.
Great. And then just a couple last ones for fun here. The first was, what advice are you going to give Purple Patch Pro Sam, and who's your money on for the pros?
We got 3 pros.
I should say.
We've got 3. We've got 3 pros racing. So we have Sam Appleton, obviously. We have a couple of athletes that many of you guys might not have heard of, but Lena Tarms is racing in the women's pro race. I would keep a sneaky eye on her bike ride, but she's doing her second half Ironman ever not as a pro, second half Ironman ever this weekend, this next weekend at the World Championships. And then Martin Ulua coming from ITU, young guy, transition up, doing very well. He was 3rd or 4th at Maine last weekend. He's racing. Who's my money on? My money's on the fastest athlete. I can't make predictions when I've got athletes in the race, because my job is my job, as you guys can understand. But I think that I do think that it is a strength-based course that rewards less the little mountain goats that can go up really steep grades very fast, and more of the big, strong guys. There's a reason that Lionel Sanders likes this race. Rudy Von Berg would race well here. Gustav even will race well. Jan Frodeno, I think Jan's racing here, will race well. Obviously, I mean, it's not revolutionary. On the women's race, I'm very interested to see how Taylor Knibb does. Daniela Reef, it's a good course for someone like her. It's a good course for an athlete I have a lot of respect for, who does really well, who won Daytona. Someone give me Canadian. Goodness me, blanking on a name. Someone tell me who won Daytona. Good athlete. Paula Finley. Thank you. It's that, and I'm not sure what status any of these athletes are coming in, but I think it's a good race for athletes. That Holly Lawrence, good race for her. Great. This race has got Holly Lawrence written on it from a profile standpoint.
Awesome. And then we'll kind of finish up here with a combination of 2 questions from a few people. The people that were asking for advice on the run, or overall people that were feeling a little bit nervous coming into this. So any general advice for that, and any general advice for folks, especially if this is their first 70.3, or at least their first in maybe this type of challenging environment?
Yeah, so the advice is the same for both of those scenarios. If the run is a little bit threatening for you, and the overall race is a little bit intimidating for you, take it bit by bit. Really, just break it down, and don't. Whenever you hear this, that races are challenges, races are really it's the challenge is big, but each element of the challenge is not that big and not that bad. And if you can break it down bit by bit and say, I'm just gonna, whatever's in front of me, that's what I'm gonna manage. And it's funny, someone mentioned Sam Appleton earlier on, but Sam Appleton went into 70.3 World Championships in his first one, and we hadn't had the best preparation. It was his first 70.3 World Championships, and I said, just look 100 yards up the road, Sam, and just keep managing that. Manage the next 100 yards. Whether you're in the swim, that's the swim, and it's pretty easy for him. But the bike and the run, manage what's just right in front of your radar. If you keep focusing on that, you're going to be fine. And he came 4th. And so I think that it's really important that it's not going to be as bad as we can pump it up to be, particularly if you just stay focused on the moment and doing what you can control in the moment. And if you just go in and say, look, ultimately, here's the dirty truth. The only person that ultimately cares is you. And so everyone, all your family, your friends, we love you. We want you to, and we want you to do the best that you very can. We're really supportive, but we still love you at the end of this. So you're doing this for yourself. And so allow yourself to actually have a little leeway to enjoy this and say, this is going to be really, really hard. And I don't know what's going to happen, but you know what? I'm going to immerse myself in the process, going to do what I can control. And it's going to be challenging, but I'll get through it. And you will get through it. And then you'll be really proud. And we'll smile and celebrate.
I don't think there's any better way to top it off than that. All right, folks, thanks again so much for coming. Again, we'll be sending out some post-event additional email content to you guys, so please stay tuned for that. You can always reach out to us at info@purplepatchfitness.com if you have additional follow-up questions or anything, you know, or want to get more information on anything we talked about tonight. And we will wish you the best of luck and hopefully see you out there on course.
See you out there on course, and embrace the challenge. There is no fear of failure. I want to wish everyone the very, very best of luck, but also make sure that you're smiling. I don't want to see grumpy faces out there. Keep it in context. Go and have fun. We will see you in there. The recording will get sent to you within the next day or so, I promise you. But everyone out there, let's go rock and roll. We'll see you on race site. Best of luck. Have fun.